And ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Thank you all so much for joining us right here. We are the Voice of Reason podcast. My name is Sean Phillips, and as always, I am joined alongside my two co-hosts, the one and only Andrew Van Beber and Travis Kirkendall. Gentlemen, how are you two doing this evening?
Fantastic. I've just got my fresh reaming done by the federal government, and I'm a good citizen, and I've filed my taxes.
Hey, there
Did
we
you
go.
uh
There we
did
go.
you make sure to report your stolen property as well?
My stolen property and everything that I may have, every car that I have stolen and, didn't return and.
Way to be a great law-abiding citizen. That's what I like to see and hear. Outstanding.
Travis, what happened today in your high flying adventures?
Oh man, what a day. Been up since 1 a.m. Uh I lost my phone on a phone tower today. Uh Trying to multitask,
Oh my
talking to somebody on the phone
gosh.
and I didn't even have my hand on the phone. I was sitting there, doing the whole shoulder thing while trying to carry a 60-pound antenna across the tower. It didn't work
Oh
out very
my
well, and
gosh.
the phone fell 150 feet, and I'm waiting on insurance to send me a new one. So that's been my day.
Have they given you a time frame for when they'll actually be giving you that
I,
phone?
I should get it either tomorrow night or Wednesday. So
So they're overnighting it to you then?
yeah, overnighting it. So fingers crossed it's tomorrow night, but I don't think it's gonna get here till Wednesday. But
Yeah.
it is what it is.
And now the thing is, does your wife know what happened? Does your wife know what happened?
Oh yeah, she knows.
So she tries to call you. I wonder if he's cheating on me. He's not answering
Oh,
his phone.
she thought something was wrong. 'Cause, I mean, I work a dangerous job and she doesn't
Yeah.
hear from me after about 5 o'clock. She gets kind of worried. And I was still, so my phone, you can still see like just a little bit on the bottom of the screen. The rest is black. So I can see like a call pop up and you could just make out like the green to swipe over. And her dad called me and I explained everything to him. And when I got home, I opened up my tablet and I FaceTimed her and worked it all
She
out.
saw
Yeah,
your face, so
That's all.
yeah,
what
That's
an
all she
sounds
adventure.
needed.
like quite the day.
That's all she needed. That is all she needed.
Yeah.
What about
It's
you?
it's been a day.
What about you, Sean?
Today has also been a bit crazy. It was President's Day, so I had a couple people off. With the state of the world that it's in today, as a recruiter for the Missouri Army National Guard, it's definitely kind of been a bit of a struggle to try to really, get a lot of people engaged and interested and doing the military thing. But I can say that this past week, this past Monday through Monday, has been since I've started recruiting. I would say in the between tomorrow and the next 2.5 weeks, I've got four young men that are going down to MEPS with the intent to enlist right now. I mean, it has been a lot of work because there's so much paperwork and different little things that go into making enlistments happen. But with all the craziness, it's actually been good to see the motivation that has come from these young men. I'm excited for them, for their careers, and for what they're trying to pursue. And so, yeah, it's just been hectic. I think I had my daughter with me at the office all day today, getting, trying to do all this paperwork, and she was, good. She was able to help out. She's in that stage now where she is very clear, like she knows what a penis is and she knows what a vagina is, and as a 3-year old she likes to
Yes.
remind everybody that she knows that. And
Yes.
so
Oh
I'm sitting
God.
down with this kid, it's a 17-year-old high or 18-year-old high school kid that's
Oh
enlisting, and,
my
and his dad
God.
is there finishing paperwork, and in just the middle of them signing papers, my daughter just looks at them and says, my daddy has a penis and I have a vagina.
Oh my
and, and
God.
I was kind of laughing, and I was like, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. At least you know. And so that made such a boring day. It provided a day's worth of humor all in one. So it was good. It was good.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
wrote a joke today for like the first time in a long time, which I was pretty excited about. So it was a pretty good day.
Oh
Pretty good
my
day.
gosh. That to me that's like the sins that you have committed have been brought back upon you. a thousandfold.
Sean, I got one question for you with the recruiting. The recent recruits that you've had, what you kind of mentioned with the state of the world, have they mostly been combat MOS or support? Like, what's been or is it kind of a mix?
Big mix. Yeah. I've definitely got a couple of support MOSs, a couple that are combat, 32, 31 Bravos, military police.
Of course.
The bias is there, since we're the best, we get it done. But then also we've combat engineer, but then a logistics guy as well. So it's definitely I've got a couple people different going all in different directions. I've got recently I actually put 2 in to be helicopter repair specialist, to work with helicopters. So I had another young man. What did he do? What did he go in as? He took a bonus for, I think, petroleum supply specialist. So he's going to get some extra cash, and he wanted to work with helicopters. So he's going to be the subject matter on the fuel lines and refueling Blackhawks and Apaches and stuff like that. Nice. So he's really excited. Nice. Yeah. So definitely the people that I've been working with, and thankfully, and this is kind of, like, it's not the golden era of recruiting anymore where, people are just walking off the streets, coming to a recruiter's office and being like, hey, this is what I want to do. There's a lot of conversations that have to happen first. And the good thing is I would say the last 5 that I've enlisted, and these 4 have all been individuals that came to me first, that, whether it was at a lunch visit or I had visited their classroom, they had left a note or something, said, hey, I'd like to talk to you again. I'd like to sit down and actually meet with you. And so that's, I really, with all the rap that, a lot of high schoolers get and stuff, these young people are doing really well. I would like to give a special shout out to a Clopton alum, for those of our listeners that graduated from Clopton. It's a bit of a sad tale, but also a good tale. Wesley Dameron, who, if you from Clopton, just celebrated a birthday. He is officially graduated from basic training. He's officially a soldier. But unfortunately, day 1 of AIT, he might have torn his ACL.
Oh, no.
Like a freak accident thing. Oh, no. But he's in super good spirits. Wesley has been one of my favorite recruits that I've gotten to work with and get in the Guard. Super motivated young man that went above and beyond everything I asked, said, hey, this is what we need to get you there. He got it done like that. And so he is going to have a very successful career ahead of him. I'm really excited for him.
That's great.
A little bit of a bump in the road, but other than that, he's going to do good things. So
Sean, if I could, I want to point out a few new things. Those of you who are watching us live tonight on Facebook Live, you will notice kind of a new format that we are using here tonight on the live screen. So this is kind of a different home screen for us. You see our Voice of Reason podcast thing there in the background. You also will see 2 new added things. We decided to add our chat window so you can see, and if you want to add something to our podcast, you can see that as you add anything. I kind of just did on one of our feed there. I added something there so you can see that. Also at the bottom, for those of you who are listening to us, will be listening to us on your way to work tomorrow, we now have the Voice of Reason comment line. It is, and for those of you who are listening on the podcast, we'll repeat the number a few times tonight. It is 636-344-8097. If you dial that, you'll hear my lovely voice on there. And any comments that you want to use or anything that you want to ask us about, either during the week or during the show, or any kind of comments that you have to share, leave the message on there. If you want, you can. We're going to get it to where, later on, probably not this week, but next week we'll have it. If we, once we get a message, hey, it'll pop up on my screen and we can play it. If you don't want us to use your voice or anything on the air, just say so at the end, and we'll just use the comment, and we'll go from there. But a lot of new cool things that Sean and Travis and I sat down for about an hour yesterday, and we are talking about new things, and we will be throwing a lot of new things at you as we come. And we have, I'm really stoked at what we have coming up over the next, over the next couple of weeks and stuff like that. So definitely some cool stuff planned.
Yeah, 100% agreed. As we've talked before, and for the listeners of our show that have listened regularly, again, we thank you so much for listening to us. Um, but we are doing a couple of things, good things, to move forward with this show to continue to bring you guys the best kind of content possible. Also, for those of you that don't necessarily listen to us live all the time on Facebook, a bunch of different ways for you guys to get involved and to kind of follow along with what we're going to be talking about in upcoming shows, a better idea of what kind of guests that we're going to have, and definitely just a way for you guys to be as big of a part of the voice of reason as we are, even if you're not choosing to listen live when we go live on Facebook. We're also going to have more opportunities, more windows for you guys to actually catch the views and catch the videos if you want to watch us actually talk, if you don't just listen to us on Spotify throughout the week. So definitely plan to see a lot more of our content in your feeds. And we hope by doing that, you guys also engage with us more and more, just so we can get everyone's insight, as that was, the whole point of this show, was to get you guys involved, and discuss everything that's going on. And that kind of leads us to one of the first things that we're going to kind of talk about. I know that recently, if you guys are listening to us live here on Monday, there has been some pretty big breaking news, as the Russia has decided to slowly but surely kind of make its way into the Ukraine and a couple of eastern, if I'm not mistaken, Ukrainian regions where there's a little bit of Russian influence still in those nations. They've been declared independent states of Russia, if I'm not mistaken, by the Russian government.
Yes, they
Yeah.
have what Vladimir Putin is, and Travis and I were talking about this before the show. I talked about this with my wife today on our way over to Columbia. This, for those who are students of history or did anything in my class, you remember when we talked about this, and if you're any kind of student of history, you know about this. This is eerily similar to the same power play that Adolf Hitler did I'm not calling Putin Hitler, but he has very Hitler-esque moves going on here in declaring Hitler did back in 1939. There were two German lands that were part of Czechoslovakia and part of, I don't know why I want to say it, but I think the other part was of Yugoslavia. It was the Rhineland and the Sudetenland, both of which were occupied by German people. And Hitler made this. Those people want to be with us. They wish to be part of and so I'm going to annex those into Germany. And the rest of the world stood by and watched aimlessly and let it happen. And so, like you guys said, as of today, what was it? I guess that news conference happened at about noon, 1 o'clock our time. And so Vladimir Putin declared these two regions of the Ukraine, and I'll get the names of those regions here in a second. But these two regions, which were basically they are occupied by Russian separatists, and these people are saying, hey, we want to be a part of Russia, and he's recognized these guys as two, that this is a legitimate claim. So right now, this morning, and I sent this to the boy. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch this morning or not, but it was on the table this morning before Putin made this news conference. There was on the table a proposed talk summit between Biden and Putin, and that was being arranged by President Macron of France. And I'm sure that has since been scrapped. By the way, the name of the two republics are the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at that here. Yeah, definitely. Travis, what's your insight? I know that you've kind of been following this. a little bit here and there, especially with some of the pages that we follow and you share with me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a topic I've been paying really close attention to. Some people sent some stuff my way today, and some of the pages we follow showed it as well. There's been a lot of videos that people are posting, like claiming that they're welcoming the Russians and that they want to be a part of Russia, and they're like celebrating in the streets. And there was some other like propaganda style videos I saw as well. Our friend Hank sent this one earlier. But you look at these videos, and I'm sorry, they look absolutely staged.
Staged.
Like it does not look at all like a true celebration. There was one that showed these people dancing in the street, and it looked like a group of maybe like 15 people, and they're just like moving and shaking the camera around. It looked like it's this giant celebration. And this is just propaganda. This is political theater. This is psyops, psychological warfare, for those who don't know the term. And it's a common thing. And we Andy and I talked earlier, like he's mentioned, about what happened with Germany, and this is like straight out of the Nazi
Playbook.
Germany playbook. It
Right.
really is. It's eerily familiar from the history books. And I there was supposed to be that summit. I It looks like it might be off the table now,
Yeah.
or at least delayed, whatever that's supposed to mean. I saw that. I'd have to look it up. Maybe one of you guys can. The Biden administration announced sanctions immediately, I
Yes,
believe.
they did. Yeah.
I didn't know. I don't have the full list of like what
It,
they were doing.
the sanctions, basically what the sanctions are, it is prohibiting any American company from doing any business or any investments in those two breakaway regions, and any American business that does so will be penalized. So it's basically peeing in the wind is all it is. But I mean, it is whatever you want to call it. It is somewhat of a I really don't know what it's going to accomplish or what it's going to do for
Well,
you.
one of the things that I'm seeing, at least like in reading some of the information, I'll be 100% honest with you, and this is my own fault. I'm not well versed in the amount of trade that the United States directly does with Russia. It seems that one of the big hits that our European allies might take will be there might be some spikes in looks like energy, resources. Apparently, some of our NATO allies in Europe um, receive electricity from Russia, and it looks like wheat is a pretty big thing that they receive from there as well. So they could be in the next couple of weeks, months, anticipate because I'd assume that it looks like from what I'm seeing out of Europe, looking like they're also going to enact on the same kind of sanctions. So anticipate seeing price spikes in certain, categories in which they're, getting trade from. I don't know, aside from, vodka, what kind of big old export Russia really has. And,
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's
and,
not like we're buying Russian cars and Russian televisions and Russian, electronics. But this is, I mean, to me, this is a widely destable. I understand as I've been following this and I've been looking at this that a lot of the stink is over. Well, it is over. Ukraine's desire to join NATO, and you know, I really don't know. I mean, NATO is a Cold War. I don't want to call it a relic, but it is a relic of the Cold War because it was created to counter the communist effect. And by name, there's only, China, North Korea, and Cuba and Vietnam are the only communist countries left in the world. Now, by practice, you look at what Russia is doing and the way Vladimir Putin has pretty much run Russia is communist in nature. Um, and his worry is, this you basically Ukraine can't join NATO, and so and these and I don't and they're under a ceasefire since 2014. They've been under this what's called the Kiev, I believe the Kiev Accords I forgot what accords. I believe they were called the Kiev Accords, were to set up this peaceful that Russia and Ukraine both would recognize these what was the Crimean state, which had officially broken away, and so these two new republics he's recognizing. I mean, it's they lost, and they lost the Ukraine. The Russians lost the Ukraine, and part of the speech that Putin made today, he actually he mentioned, the Ukrainians are, and again, Travis, it's the same rhetoric. The Ukrainians are Russian. They are Russian in nature. They are, and all this other stuff. And it's very frightening to see. It's like nobody read. It's no like nobody read history books. We played the appeasement game in World War II, and I mean, Vladimir Putin made a statement last week, and he rattled. He threw out the nuclear card, which that statement frightened me, because he said we have nuclear weapons too, and we may even be more developed than everybody else. And I mean, if that's not a peeing contest, I don't know what is. I mean, he's whipping it out there and showing his yang to everybody to see. And look, I'm not afraid to, smack you upside the head with this. And that is nuclear weapons were designed as a deterrent. They were not, and this is my own political philosophy. I mean, but it's also been, I've read this too, that nuclear weapons, you don't use that as a threat to say, I'm ready to come at you with nuclear weapons. That's a guy who says he's got nothing to lose.
No, it's and he even said it in his speech. He's like, no one will win. He's like, there will be no winners if it goes to that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, right. You're right. He did say that. Yes.
And no, Putin's definitely laying the wood down right now, and it is frightening to see it. And one interesting point I'd like to add with, the U.S. responded with sanctions, something that Russia has done recently over the past few years, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I've heard this from a bunch of financial channels I follow. Russia has lowered the amount of US dollars they keep on their balance sheet significantly. Like, they don't have, almost compared to where they were 10 years ago, the amount of US dollars they keep on their balance sheet is very, very small. And they've been accumulating a lot of gold and precious metals. So with that being said, I'm not a financial expert or nothing like that, but I can't see how much these sanctions are truly going to affect Russia.
It's a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
I mean, we did, and again, to go back to repeat history again, Travis, 1931, and we're actually, when we're in school from not missing snow days, but when we were in school last week, I was talking about this with my U.S. history class. Before the United Nations, there was this weak organization that was called the League of Nations. And in 1931, this was 11 years after the conclusion of World War I. 1931, Japan invades and takes Manchuria. And the League of Nations just gave bad Japan, and they imposed sanctions. And we had cut off, at that time, we had cut off some supplies to Japan, which, kind of pushed them towards a more warlike attitude. So to me, sanctions, I don't know. I think you either have to put up or shut up. And this is to me this is something that we have to watch on the daily. And again, we'll be posting this stuff. We'll be posting links on the page here within this week and everything. But keep an eye on your news sources. And this is just a side note. I'll just chase a rabbit just for a second, fellas. So through this whole thing, and we've talked about this before, be careful who you choose your news sources from on this, because there are definitely different spins on this. My wife and I have pretty much defoxed and DCNN'd ourselves and our devices. and we have pretty much locked on with two sources: News Network and the BBC. AP is the Associated Press. They've been around, since the beginning of radio. They were one of the first united, my wife said the other night, she said, "Man, this is kind of boring reading AP." I was like, "What do you mean boring?" And she said, "There's no spin on it. It's just the news." And I was like, "Well, there you go."
No, that's a really good point. It's like any of the issues we talk about. We always encourage people and our listeners to do your own research. Don't just take what you see on the TV as truth. Really read into it. Read from multiple sources. Check your sources. It's the same thing
I
you're
would
saying.
I would love to see what the Russian news. I don't know what their back in the day during the Cold War, that their newspaper was called Pravda, which meant the truth. And of course, after the fall of Pravda ran up until I think 1980. I mean, it was started under Stalin, and it ran it well into the 80s. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, it pretty much just went. That was it.
I've never heard of that one. That's
Yep,
interesting. But
Pravda, Pravda, the truth. Talked about the joys of communism and the evil of capitalism. So we've got
So
Go ahead.
I would like to get your guys' insight on this, just because one of the big things that I've seen today, and I muted a lot of different pages on Twitter just because it was more people just complaining as opposed to like actually having the conversation. But one of the big things that I saw was the amount of people that were debating on whether or not this particular situation, if this would have happened if Donald Trump was still president. I would love to start with you, Travis, get your opinion, and then get V's. I just asked one of our listeners says no. If Colby, if you're listening still, if you'd like to type out why you think that'd be awesome. Make sure you can either type it right there on Facebook, Twitch, or you can use the VOR Voice of Reason comment line at 636-344-8097. Please give us your thoughts as to what when you said no, as to why you think that. If you guys are listening on Spotify a few days later from now, please make sure you guys can always use the Voice of Reason comment line at 636-344-8097. So, Travis, I'll start with you. What do you think? Do you think that if Donald Trump was still in office, do you think that the reaction that we've seen from the Russian government is the same, that we would have seen? And then also, if this would have been the move from Russia, if Russia still would have done this, what do you think the difference between how the Trump administration would have attacked this versus the Biden administration?
So I'll go back. I said this many episodes ago, and we were talking about the China influence going on in the Pacific. And the Chinese government came out and said that they didn't take Trump literally, but they took Trump seriously. And I think Russia took Trump seriously as well. I don't find it coincidence that these moves are happening when we have a new administration. This is the Ukrainian issue. This has gone on for a few years now. Sean, you were even over there back when it was, what year was it again? You were deployed to
2016. Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, people are acting like this is brand new when it's not. No. They already invaded the Ukraine before.
No, so I find it interesting that we have a new administration now and these moves are happening. And going back to what the Chinese said about President Trump, and in my opinion, no, I don't think. I think he would have took a much firmer stand on this by far. And I truly do believe that if Russia still would have continued to do this with Trump as president, I think we would have seen a significantly more military response from the U.S. I think there would have been way more troops massing in probably the bases there in Germany. I think we would have sent probably soldiers in Poland. I don't know if there would have been troops going to Ukraine exactly, but I think there would have been more of a stance. more
Sure.
than
What do we
just
send?
sanctions.
7,000 soldiers?
I think
If
we're at
that.
like 7,000
That's
total.
yeah, that's a joke.
I don't, I'm not, and
Compared
I've
to
said it before, I'm not the biggest Trump fan.
mhm,
However, his stance on foreign policy, he was firm.
yeah.
He was very firm on his foreign policy when it came to stuff like this. I don't think this would have happened.
Okay. V, what about you?
This is I, I am not I vehemently opposed Trump but about some of his policies, but I did agree with his foreign policy. What he did with putting North Korea got put in its place, and he was able to sit down and talk to Kim Jong Un. He was able to maintain better trade relations, although strained trade relations with China, and but there's part of me that, and this is, I'm going to delve just into the conspiracy theory side of my mind just for a little bit. What if, part of me wonders, what if there actually is a relationship under the table with Putin and Trump? What if this is a destabilizing move to try to get the current administration to look bad? I pray and hope that that is just a crazy whim, that it's just something that I am way off on, that we won't know until Judgment Day before we stand before God and and know what happened. But I hope that that is not the case. That this is a, Trump and Putin. They played nice together in Trump's 4 years in office, and you know. But again, that report that came out yesterday that said that there absolutely was no, you know, connection between Trump and the Ukraine and Russia. I think that Trump would have made a stronger statement than what Biden would have done. But at this point, I mean, I think we're very far past shoulda, woulda, and coulda, because now
Right.
is there's I hope that Joe's not being tucked into bed right now. I hope that he's sitting up with his National Security Council, that he's sitting up with his Joint Chiefs, and they're actively pursuing a plan of action that will move things forward.
Now, again, the next question is with where the big difference between Russia and, the Islamic State when it comes to militant power. Do we, how much, boots on ground kind of warfare are we potentially expecting to see in your guys' opinion? Or are we just kind of looking at like a Cold War II? Um, seeing the interesting thing is just the sheer amount of mobilization that Russia has had is staggering. Like people have to understand what it had gotten at one point up to 120 to like 150,000 troops or something
150,000.
like that,
Mm-hmm.
150,000 soldiers. I don't think people really understand how many soldiers that is. And then on top of that, there were satellite imagery of, uh, you know, hospitals essentially being put up, tent hospitals, but hospitals nonetheless. So those kind of logistical, that kind of logistical strategery is not necessarily just done all the time for some training exercises. Okay, there was all of these things have been planned. There's a reason. I mean, they are moving naval ships. Um, this was a very strategically planned move, and we've seen it for weeks and months. This has built up, and so I would really hate to see the Ukraine become a battleground between Russia, potentially China, and NATO forces. But do you guys anticipate boots on ground, or do you guys anticipate more of a Cold War II? Travis, what do you think?
First, I think people need to realize how significant this is. This isn't like, 5,000 troops get sent to squabble with some rebels or something. This was a mass gathering of 150,000 troops to invade a country. This hasn't been seen in a very long time. This is a pretty big deal. What do I anticipate? If we don't, I think it really depends on what the U.S.'s response is. If we keep doing what we did in World War II and we just keep, slapping them on the wrist, eventually this is going to get ugly. And I don't think, I think this undoubtedly becomes World War III. Without, getting all tinfoil hat or like doomsday or whatever, I legitimately think this is what it leads to if we don't take a firm stance on this. However, if we do a firm stance, I do think it puts us in more of like a Cold War situation where it's just kind of threats back and forth and a lot of talk. But personally speaking, I think I'd rather have us just bad mouthing each other versus actually shooting at each other. So I think what we really need to do, the U.S. needs to draw their line in the sand. The West needs to draw their line in the sand and say, this needs to stop. We cannot allow this to keep happening.
So
I'm a foreign policy expert, but something needs to be done about this because it doesn't stop with Ukraine. I promise you, this does not stop with Ukraine. Go ahead, Andy.
So according to Google, the Russian armed forces are, and I'll just read this direct from the page. The Russian armed forces are one of the world's largest military forces with around 1 million active duty personnel, which is the world's 5th largest, and at least 2 million reserve personnel. It is mandatory for all citizens 18 to 27 to be drafted for a year of service in the armed forces, which is common in European nations. I know the British do that, the Russians do that, the Germans do that. So this is not something that is uncommon, but when you're talking, so, you've got, what, 1/10 of your military parked in the Ukraine? That's a very, what Sean, do you have any, what's the, what are our numbers that we have as far as active military?
Active, I could not tell you off the top of my head. I know
I
the state of Missouri.
Say the U.S. Army is like 450,000.
Yes, that sounds about right, but I don't know if that includes Guard.
Let me just type it up here and see.
Soldiers.
Let me get this stat here. Okay, so Army active duty 481,000. There you go, boys. You got it. Navy active 341,996. Army National Guard 336,703. Air Force active duty 329,614. So what do you got there? 400, 700 million. So about 1 point.
So what I'm seeing on this graph, and this comes from macrotrends.net, U.S. military size 1985 to 2022. According to this, I don't know how accurate this is, so please don't take this
right
to heart. But it looks like we currently sit at 1,379,800 United States military personnel. Understand what a lot of people don't, might not think of with that is that does not mean that's a 1,379,000 whatever number I just said, boots on ground infantrymen ready to, raise gung ho. A lot of that is logistics individuals. There's so many different things that go into that.
So so to answer your original question, if we are to say boots on the ground, let's say, would we be safe to say of that number? Would be safe to say that we could put actively maybe 400,000 boots on the ground? You think? Would that sound like a realistic number?
Eventually, yes.
Okay. So in my mind, we haven't seen that kind of troop movement. I mean, we didn't even have that much troop movement during Korea.
Maybe what, World War II?
World War II. I mean, we didn't even have it. We didn't have that.
Yeah.
No, we didn't have anything close to that in Vietnam. Now, over the course of the Vietnam War, we probably had somewhere between 400,000 and 600,000 on the, but not at one time. At one
Sure.
time, when you saw World War II, was the last time that we saw anything like this, because when you look back at World War II, I mean, women were running the factories. You know, the number of
Yeah.
men who were serving, those who could serve, did serve. You know, everybody kind of laughed when you see that scene in Captain America. I mean, they weren't too picky on how, you know, the reason why my father-in-law didn't get drafted because he had flat feet. They wouldn't, you know, whatever, because he didn't have any arch to his foot, you know. But now, I mean, uh, boots on the ground. If I would be surprised if we would commit 20,000 tops.
I'd be shocked.
I would be too. I would be too if we had if at tops. I'm saying high end 20,000 now. What are the British prepared to do? What are the French prepared to do? What are the Germans prepared to do? If this is a true NATO effort, then you're looking at, you know, you're looking at Finland, Denmark, Iceland. Uh, I got to think of the. So you've got Austria, Belgium, Germany. I mean, how much are these guys? A multinational force. What effect are we going to have? Because
When you got to think, in my opinion, you know, the U.S. we're a bit lucky with our geographical location, as we're not kind of dropped sitting there on top of one another. I mean, and you
those
look
guys,
at, you
yeah, and
know,
those guys are. That's
yeah,
they've got it. They've got an active dog in the fight because, you know, when we've talked about this many times when we had our German foreign exchange students and our Italian foreign exchange students there at Clopton. You know, they say, hey, you know, I remember Vito Buterow when he came to the United States. He said, you know, He said it amazes me that you guys can drive 23 hours and still be speaking the same language. You may have different dialects. He said, but it amazed me that you. He said, and his dad worked for the Italian national government, and he said, you know, we would go to the, you know, and his dad was, you know, part of these. Were part of these entourages that were going to these, you know, these meetings, you know, and for them it was, you know, hey, we're going to drive up to Austria. Okay, well that's 8 hour drive up to Austria. Okay, drive up to Austria. You're all the different territories and all the different languages you're crossing through. These guys are literally. I would bet to say that you could probably make it from Germany to the Ukraine. I would say no more than probably 15 hours. I would say at most, probably. You know, so this isn't something that they can say, oh, that's over there, we're not going to worry about it. You know, we're not. I don't think America has a much of concern because, oh, that's, and again, World War I, World War II mindset that we had. We have enough issues here at home. We don't need to worry. That's a European problem. Let that take care of itself. But you cannot, from a historical point of view, you cannot take that mentality, because if you do, I mean, bad things are going to happen. I know I'm going to sound like a Star Wars, but there was a line from episode 1 when they said, you know, when you had these, you know, the droids were coming down there attacking, and these guys, the whatever those undersea creatures were that Jar Jar Binks was, they're like, well, that's a land thing, that's not a sea thing, and they said, well, we live in a symbiote circle, and it's the same thing today. You know, what happens to you may not influence me or affect me right now, but somewhere down the line, it is gonna come back to us. I mean, Travis, you're already talking about, you know, the market taking a tank today. You know, that's just step one. I mean, we are so globally interdependent now that, you know, somebody on the side may be sneezing, but eventually we're going to catch a cold here eventually. You know, that's how it's going to spread around.
well, that's what happened in World War II.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but so, and again, another question I have for you guys. We already kind of know, or at least what we've been told, what we've seen is that Russia and China seem to have had communication. It seems like they have shared interest with one another, allegedly. Now, this begs the question of, there's another superpower that people, seem to keep forgetting about, and that's nations like India and their involvement. We already know how they're on thin ice with China, and how those relations have been. So we look at China, and this again, it kind of just goes down to like money talks, bullshit walks,
Right.
where I look at like just geographically where that is, and our war has been with the Islamic State for forever, essentially. Now, in China, where they have Muslim concentration camps, you know, how does it in turn, if let's say we hit that World War III kind of level of where we're starting to see, do we see the Islamic State teaming with Russia and China? Or how do you think, Travis, where do you think some of these puzzle pieces fall in, now that we're kind of like pulling up the fantasy draft board, who's kind of going where?
The Islamic State is
They're the one
kind
that
of
I can't really decide, because of like, with our history with them, but in the same token, like, how much of the blind eye is like, you are very clearly
But
not welcomed in Russia or China.
no,
Like that's very clear.
they go where money is.
but follow the chain though, Sean.
Yeah.
Where did the Islamic State get? You know where the Islamic State got their start at? Syria.
Yes.
Mhm.
They got their start in Syria. Who is Syria in bed with? Russia. Okay, and you know, I can honestly say that I think that where this is leading. I mean, if I say the Islamic State's going to, like Travis said, they're going to follow the money. You know, and
I completely agree. Is they'll follow the money.
yeah, it's
Well, and then it again, what people don't understand, and again, the only reason why, at least for me, why I go, well, this is quote unquote an issue, and why some people, if you don't understand exactly why this is an issue, is, let's just say if there is conflict in which NATO forces get involved in warfare, actual combat with Russia, there will be sides taken, like we've just talked about, the Islamic State, which again, if there comes fighting, we've already seen just a few months ago how hot it was between Israel and Palestine. Let that heat up even more and give them a reason, with resources coming in from one side or the next side. You already have Australia, who's created a bunch of sanctions on China and who's having issues over there. You already have India and China who are on thin ice. The question is, now that where we are at in the world with technology, is it, I just, it makes me think, because we all kind of know war is bad, war's not necessarily good, but I think people knew that back in 1945 as well. So when we talk like, oh, people aren't going to be, marching in boots and, taking over streets, it's because like what we have iPhones now is people think that that's what stops. Because look at a lot of those nations, like there's a reason why. And again, the United States has a well-regulated militia in the National Guards that each state has. But in the same token, now that Russia is claiming independence for all these old former Russian states, it's like, okay, well, when are they going to want Alaska back? And is that a move that they would like to take? And then, with Russia being connected to Canada, you have a lot of these European nations. You have nations like Australia. How well regulated would their militia be if China was to invade a nation where citizens aren't well armed? It's little things like that that kind of make me, really kind of second guess. Like, when we, at least like from what I've seen, people don't really fear the fear of like, they're not going to invade the streets because what, we're going to cancel the nation for taking over because now that we have cell phone footage of how shitty people are going to be. No, again, nuclear warfare isn't the first thing that I turn to. Like, it's just because I think that people really, hopefully nations have an understanding of what the long-term ramifications are of nuclear warfare. But could we potentially see Russian or Chinese soldiers marching, and taking over nations like Poland, taking over nations, across Europe, and even in, places that, didn't fall during World War II, but could potentially.
Let me make a quote to you, and I don't have. I wish I had. Now that what you just said just reminded me. There was a book that was written on the history of World War One that was called The Guns of August, and the Guns of August talked about what it looked at was everybody believed that they were so in tune with everybody's moves. And this was again in 1917. They believed that they were so in tune with everybody else's moves that they knew without consulting, well, this is the move we're going to make this move, and surely they won't elevate it to this, and surely they won't elevate it to that. And then, you fast forward, and I'm also reminded of what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were sitting there, and Cuban Missile Crisis is in my top 10 things of historical events that I love to study. When you look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we assumed, we Russia denied, well, we're not putting missiles into Cuba. Well, then we had satellite. Well, they are putting missiles into Cuba. Now we're going to do, okay, we're going to make our stand. You're not going to put missiles in Cuba. Well, then you need to pull your missiles out of Turkey. Well, we're going to attack on Berlin. Well, we're going to do that. And I think right now, and this isn't helped by the news cycle, but what you're seeing happen is everybody's making these bold predictions. And when you toss out the term nuclear war, that cannot be, and this is from a child of the Cold, I came in on the very tail end of the Cold War, but as kids growing up, we were taught to fear nuclear war. And we were taught that is because it's not like one person's just going to launch a nuclear weapon and then that's it.
Right.
Because it's going to be a domino effect. When you look at 8 or 9 nations in the world that have nuclear weapons, I mean, and the research has shown that there is enough nuclear capabilities to blow up the world 6 times over. And it may have, now that number may have increased. That number, but I remember doing a paper in college, and at that time, that was 1996, we had enough nuclear weapons at that time to detonate the world 6 times over. And it's not going to be just, like I said, it's not going to be just one guy launching a weapon. They launched theirs. The purpose of, and there's a term that came out of the Cold War, it was called MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction. It was kind of like saying, okay, you're going to kill us, we'll kill you back. There's no winners. And it really frightened me when Vladimir Putin, who's a Cold War throwover, former KGB spy agent, and he tosses out, well, we have a superior nuclear powers than you guys do. Okay, do you want a cookie? Because that's not going to solve anything. You don't want to go there. That is not an envelope that you want to push. But to me, if he's already drawing, and again, Travis, World War II, he's already drawing ultimatums. He's already drawn this line. When you throw that nuclear weapon talk out there, you're throwing that out there, and that is a dangerous thing to put out there.
No, it really is. It's not a when you're dealing with ultimatums like this, there can't be good outcomes. I mean, you look throughout history, it shows that time and time again. And I don't know what happens. I hope I hope that politics prevail and we can come to some type of agreement where, they do that summit and they talk whatever it is that they talk about and there is no war. But after reading the news today, I think we're going down I think we're going to have a
Slippery
snowball
slope.
effect. Yeah.
None of
And I
us.
think I think despite everything in Ukraine, we need to pay attention to the Pacific. We need to see what China does with Taiwan. If China invades Taiwan in I would say this year or maybe early next year, I think undoubtedly the writing is on the wall. It's just,
We and think about this. We haven't. And I'm 47. The Vietnam War ended shortly before I was born, and none of us have seen. I mean, we've seen the Iraq. I saw the Iraq War, but that was to me. I never had a fear about the Iraq War. Desert Storm. I never had a fear about it because it was televised. We were dropping bombs. We had smart weapons. Saddam Hussein was a buffoon who thought he was something and he was nothing, and we made him look like a clown. We have never seen in our lifetime. This is, and I can only imagine, if I could get my dad not to talk 5,000 minutes in a row, I'd have him on the show. But I mean, as he was a child who grew up in, he was born in 34. So, I mean, so that would have made him 7 years old when the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor. I mean, we've never witnessed in our lifetime a superpower like this throwing their weight around. And none of these guys, even the old politicians in the room, even Joe Biden was a young sprout in World War II. So there is, and this is something that I think they have to really look at. There is no wise old man in the room because our World War I generals are gone. They're dirt. They're not gonna. You're not gonna have MacArthur rise from the grave and say, here's how we would, or Eisenhower or Patton or any of those guys say, well, this is how we dealt with it. None. I mean, you have very few World War II veterans left who were just basically grunt soldiers. And it's sad to say that, but I mean, there is no wise old man in the room. Even you can't even use Cold War tactics because I still think that Putin is. I still think Putin is hell bent on revenge. I said this in a previous podcast. I think Putin is hell bent on revenge because, like what you guys said earlier, they lost that territory in 1991 when the Soviet Union fell, and they won it back.
I think, I don't know. I don't know what to think. I mean, I definitely think this is a chance for them to, like you said, reclaim what was theirs. I mean, I know we said it a million times, but it really is. History repeats itself. This is like exactly World War II playing itself all over again. I hate to repeat it, but it's eye-opening. And here's what I'll say. And maybe this is just me saying this, but I think other people should consider it too. And talk to Sean about this. If China decides to invade Taiwan, like I anticipated, I will be back in the military. I'll go back because it's inevitable at that point. You can either wait to be drafted or you can sign up. Mm-hmm. You can call me a doomsdayist. You can call me whatever. That's just how I see it. Talk to your local recruiter. You got Sean right here. You can join the Missouri National Guard. But yeah, I don't see this ending good unless we really take a stand against it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll boil down to having firm leadership, leadership that is capable of being able to, go into the room and actually sit down. I don't necessarily think that Donald Trump was that person either. Mm-hmm. However, I think that Donald Trump at least would have showed up. And that's the difference is it's scary, regardless of how you feel about him, even if you like the man and, his policies are fine. Joe Biden is not the person that I think needs to be in a room with an individual like Vladimir Putin to try to come to peaceful agreements. you can, watching him speak, you could tell Vladimir Putin has 0 ounce of respect for our president currently. And that is why I think this is such an issue right now, and why we're seeing this rampant uptake in these kind of movements. So it's interesting. I think that, in a perfect world, I'd like to hope that we're not potentially looking down something as crazy as World War III, or I'm hoping this is more like a Cold War II situation where we're just having a pissing contest with one another, and I'm, as on edge as it is to be, at least you're just on edge and you're not, thrust in the shit. So hopefully that's kind of where it sits. But Travis, like you, again, I look at this, and, from a lesson that I had in your class, V, was look at the start of World War One with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It wasn't like that was the heaviest piece to fall, but it started a trickle effect that led to World War One.
Right, and I was watching. I was actually surprised. I was actually watching. You mentioned World War One. I finally got around to watching The King's Man yesterday.
I watched that. I watched that Saturday night.
And the first
Great
part,
movie.
the first part of that movie is pretty well dead on. How Grivalio, he took the wrong, how Archduke Francis Ferdinand took the wrong turn. They got on a dead end street, and that's when Grivalio Princip, popped him. But no, when you look at how there are so many, and we've discussed pretty much every. I think we've done a good job tonight about talking about every aspect and every level of this from top to bottom. And sorry for those who saw what we were talking about tonight. Things changed since 8:00 this morning. So
yes,
but this is the discussion that I wanted us to have. I think and as always, folks, please let us know where you're at. I will probably post a survey either tonight or tomorrow morning, and we'll get your guys' input on this throughout the week. And like we said, again, comment on our Voice of Reason comment line, 636-344-8097. And we'll, if you want us to, we can use your comments next week when we're on the air, and we will, post those comments if you want us to. And if not, you want to just say your piece, and then we'll quote them back later on. But definitely, this has been a discussion that needed to happen, and I'm glad that we had it.
Can I add? I know we're trying to end the show, but I want to add one more point.
Sure.
When you listen to let's compare leadership, because Sean was talking about how he doesn't believe, and I don't believe that Biden really is the leader for this job that we're facing right now. Putin is an animal that I don't think the U.S. has any idea how we're going to solve this. Just watch the man speak. Like, go to YouTube and watch him give a press conference. Watch him do
on
speak
anything
in public.
Yeah, on anything.
He is articulate. He is intelligent. He is to the point. He does not dodge questions, and he speaks with intent. That is scary. Mm-hmm. We have our leader, the leader of the free world, reads a teleprompter barely.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what I want to. That's just what I want to end on. Mm-hmm. This is
regardless of what people think about his policy, how he did as a president. I have missed President Obama for a very long time. When it came to hearing an individual speak, whether or not you liked what came out of his mouth, I could listen to him talk for days. And then especially having 4 years of Trump, and now 4 year, or the next
year of Biden.
Yes, the year of Biden. God, it's felt long. And it's definitely. I miss that kind of leadership.
Yeah.
Of just having someone that can and be in the room and command the room in the way and that President Obama did when he would speak. So, but yes, Napoleon wasn't very tall, but he had a loud voice. Hitler was a, malnourished twat who spoke well.
Yeah.
These kind of things. And now you have a former KGB agent who's probably slit more throats than he can care to count, who now has a voice and has power. So
Yes.
interesting times are ahead. However, as the times do get interesting, so does our show. So please make sure that you guys check it out, whether it's live right here on Facebook if you're listening with us. If you're listening to us during your morning wank or car drive on Spotify, we also appreciate that as well. Make sure you check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean. We are on Twitch, Twitch TV, Voice of Reason Podcast 2021. We're also on YouTube, Voice of Reason Podcast 2021. Anywhere where you get your video viewing, we're on Google Podcast. Your podcast listening needs, we are there. We are in the process of getting on Pandora pretty soon as well. We are on iHeartRadio. Make sure you guys just gotta do a quick search, Voice of Reason Podcast 2021. If you have an Alexa, make sure you ask her, hey, Alexa, play Voice of Reason Podcast 2021, and she'll get it spitting for you. She's listening in, and she's always listening, probably
Getting ready to cancel
Patreon
us.
acting it up in your in your home. But she also provides great content. So again, this episode of the Voice of Reason podcast is brought to you by Van Beber and Sons, the best DJ services for your Midwest wedding, bar mitzvah, recircumcision, whatever you've got going on. Van Beber and Sons is there for you.
Yeah.
Make sure you mention the Voice of Reason podcast if you check out their page for 10% off, I do believe.
Yes.
Of your DJ services.
Yep.
Also, make sure you check out AmericanTraditionalCoffee.com. There's a bunch of great new products. Has our special line been launched yet, Travis? Are we still waiting on that to drop?
We're still waiting on it.
Still in limbo.
I will say discount code coming soon for all our listeners.
Perfect. Yep. Next week, we'll have a discount code for American Traditional Coffee. We now have K-Cups in stock. So if you are an individual that uses a Keurig or any kind of coffee device that you use K-Cup for, we've got it available. All kinds of great different new flavors. We now have decaf coffee if you're a decaf coffee drinker. It is live on AmericanTraditionalCoffee.com. Discount code coming soon. Again, thank you all so much for listening to us. If you would like to leave a comment that we can either play live on our show next week, or we can read off whatever you had to say, make sure you reach out to our comment line. It is the Voice of Reason comment line at 636-344-8097. Please feel free to shoot us a message right here on Facebook, the Voice of Reason Podcast 2021 homepage, and we will love to talk about whatever you guys have. Before we sign out of here, and I'm sure that the week is going to be crazy, I know that next week we hopefully will have some time to talk about a couple different situations that we've been talking about between the three of us, including the Blackstone Labs steroid scandal. We'll hopefully dive a little bit into the Canadian convoy that we're seeing and any updates that we get with the Ukraine as well. We will definitely be talking about as those things change. Before we sign out of here, gentlemen, is there anything that you guys would like to add before we say goodbye to our friends?
Have a great week and please share.
Yep. Have a great week, guys. Thank you for listening. We appreciate every single one of you. If you guys have ideas, I know we made some changes to the show. If you have ideas, we value your feedback and we listen. We want to make the show better as much as possible and make it a better experience for you, the listener. So if you got ideas, throw them our way. And thank you guys again.
We'll see you all
Awesome.
next week.
See you next week.